guys, it's Gabby, and I'm not so good at uploading wrap-ups. I'm sorry, I apologize, and I'm getting better. I started out really well with uploading wrap-ups. It was good. I could upload a wrap-up every month, I could discuss all the books I want to discuss, and like, that was that. Then we get to later on in the year, and suddenly I'm talking about 2 or 3 months worth of books in one video. That can't happen. I'm done with that. That's not gonna happen anymore. I promise. We are going to be uploading monthly wrap-ups on this channel. It's gonna happen, guys. I promise. Because I can't afford for it not to happen, because I am definitely going to read more books in 2017 than I did in 2016. So that's exactly what I'm going to be doing today. I'm going to be bringing you my December wrap-up. I read 5 books in December, bringing my total to 66 books read in 2016, which is not bad at all considering this was the first year that I ever kept track of my reading progress, and I know that I didn't read as much as I normally can, so I'm definitely going to step it up in 2017 and hopefully try to read 100 books. Fingers crossed, although it's probably not going to happen, but with all the books that I need to read, I hope that it would happen. But before we can get into future wrap-ups and future reads for 2017, we gotta discuss these last 5 books from 2016. So if you have not read them yet, hopefully this will be an incentive for you to pick them up in 2017 if they sound interesting to you. So my first read for December was Heartless by Marissa Meyer, and guys, I love this book so much! It's absolutely fantastic, just such an amazing Alice in Wonderland retelling, and it has such fantastic roots in the original world, so many great references, all the characters are really well developed, and it's just such a fun read, and I absolutely love it as a diehard Alice in Wonderland fan. This book was just so perfect. It was the first Alice in Wonderland retelling I ever read, as well as the first Marissa Meyer book, and both of them just completely and entirely blew my expectations away, and I have 5 out of 5 stars. This book is so fantastic. And if you are looking at this book and you're like, that cover, I don't recognize it, this cover comes from an Owl Crate box. They gave us an exclusive cover for the November box, and if you want to see me unbox that, link will be down below. So if you're wondering what this story is about, I would consider it like a prequel Alice in Wonderland retelling in which we follow Catherine Pinkerton as a teenager, and she loves baking. That's her passion, and that's what she wants to do. She wants to open up a bakery. And so her parents have other plans for her. They want her to marry the King of Hearts and then become the Queen of Hearts. So this whole story is Kath sort of going on this journey to end up to where we know her today as the Queen of Hearts. So you get to see what she goes through and having to end up where she ends up. And it's just a fantastic story, and I would like to believe it canon with the Alice in Wonderland world, and this is how the Queen of Hearts ended up how she did. And one thing that I would say about this book is that there's some people who really aren't enjoying it. So 2 recommendations I would give you if you're kind of deciding about whether or not you want to pick this book up. One, I would recommend you enjoy the Alice in Wonderland world. That's kind of obvious, but there's people who pick this book up that don't really like the Alice in Wonderland world, and then they really don't end up enjoying this book. So if you don't like Alice in Wonderland, don't read this book, because you're not going to enjoy it, because it has very, very strong roots in the Alice in Wonderland world. Then the other thing is that this book is slightly predictable, because it's basically just a character's backstory and how she ends up where she ends up. So it is kind of obvious as you start to get towards the last 50 to 70 pages, that's for where all of our characters are going to end up, but there's nothing you can do about that. It's just the way that the book was written, so I didn't mark out for that. I rated this book 5 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it, and I think if you can get past that aspect of predictability and just enjoy the story and the way that it was written, it's an absolutely fantastic book, and I totally recommend it to any Alice in Wonderland fans, because this book was just straight up fantastic, and it's also absolutely gorgeous. I love this new cover, and then of course the nakedness. Take a moment to observe, look at that, look at that. Just, oh my god, just gorgeous! So my next read for December was Frostblood by Ellie Blake. This book came out January 10th, but I got an ARC of it back in May, and I finally picked it up now because the frosty cover was drawing me in December, the winter season, when it's more than freaking cold in Chicago. So this was a perfect read for December. This story is a debut novel from Ellie Blake, and it is also the first book in the series that we are going to be getting. The second book actually comes out later this year, I believe, in September. So we get 2 releases in 1 year, which is fantastic from a debut author. So I already commend her for that because the story was fantastic. So if you have not heard about this debut novel, basically we follow 2 different groups of people in this fantasy world. Frostbloods and Firebloods. Frostbloods can control frost or cold, and Firebloods can control heat or fire. And so the Frostbloods are the ones that rule over the throne. They're the ones that have the most power, the ones that are most accepted in society, while the Firebloods are more looked down upon. A lot of them have been killed or have fled the area and have gone to somewhere where they can be safe, or they're put in prisons. So we follow our main character, Ruby, who is 17 years old, and she is a Fireblood. And she ends up getting found out by a whole bunch of Frostblood rulers or leaders, or just kind of like important Frostblood people. They stick her in prison and basically leave her there to die, and then she ends up getting rescued by a group of monks and a Frostblood named Arcus, and they want to train her to basically be the leader of this rebellion against the current Frostblood government, and eventually have Frostbloods and Firebloods be equal as they once were. And so this is the whole story of Ruby coming to terms with her power and her gift and learning to master it, and just sort of figure out more about herself, as well as sort of figure out this relationship that she may have possibly brewing with Arcus. And this is just such a great debut novel. If I were to rate it, I would say like 4.75 stars, because I really enjoyed it. Of course, there's a lot of world building that needs to be done, and a lot of things that you gotta kind of figure out. So of course, I can't give like a debut novel 5 to 5 stars. I rarely ever do, because most debut novels have a lot of world building that needs to be done, so it's easy to kind of have a little bit of some stuff you need to go through, and it's not always a perfect book. But I really enjoyed this. I'm super pumped for the second book to come out later this year and to just get more from this world, because I love the characters and the world itself. And if I were to compare it to anything, I would say that I got a little bit of some Red Queen vibes, except personally I enjoy it more than the Red Queen series, and I think it's a better version of this world. And if you're kind of like interested in this book, I definitely recommend picking it up. I had a great time reading it, and it was a fantastic debut novel, and I'm really excited to read more from this series later on this year. So my next read for December was Replica by Lauren Oliver. Look at this book. Look at this. This is so cool. So this story, if you do not know, is told from 2 different points of views, Lyra's and Gemma's. There's 3 different ways that this story can be read. You can read all of Gemma's point of view, and then you can read Lyra's point of view, you can read Lyra's point of view, and then Gemma's, or you can alternate Gemma, Lyra, Gemma, Lyra, Gemma, Lyra, because Gemma has 1 extra chapter, so that way everything will be even. So this story follows, obviously, 2 characters, Gemma and Lyra, and Gemma's father is the partial owner of a company called Fine and Ives, and he has this involvement in a company called Haven. And so Gemma overhears some things that she shouldn't overhear, and ends up looking up some things about Haven that she is not supposed to know, and she gets a little bit interested in why her father would have some involvement in this corporation that nobody really knows anything about. And so she goes down to Florida on her spring break when her parents do not want her to, and so she just leaves and then gets a ride down to Florida. And while she's there, she ends up running into Lyra. And Lyra is one of the replicas that is inside the Haven facility, and she has like little to no exposure of the outside world, and so she ends up escaping from this facility and runs into Gemma. And this is just the whole story of them figuring out like what's going on in Haven, why are they making these replicas, and what's the purpose, and also figuring out what is Gemma's father's involvement in this company, all while having to avoid lots of people that could possibly be on the lookout for Lyra and Gemma now that they've gotten themselves into some trouble. So this story was a lot of fun to read. It just was so unique and so different than any other YA novel that I've ever read, and I'm always looking to read books like this that are just a little bit outside the box. This is also the first Lauren Oliver novel I've ever read, so it was interesting to get to read a little bit more from her. This is actually a series, so the second book is coming out later on this year, I believe at like the beginning of October, and I have no idea where this book is going to go, if we're going to follow the same characters, or new characters, or like what's going to happen, because I thought this book was perfect as a standalone, but I'm excited to get more from this world because I think the writing is really unique and it was a lot of fun to read. I was actually reading this with a group of friends, so it made it a lot more fun because we all kind of got to discuss and just go over a lot of our thoughts, and it was good to do that because I feel like there's lots of questions that you can have. It's just a fun read, and I'm really glad that I got to pick it up before the end of the year. My next read is not so much a read as it was like a quick flip through, and that is J.K. Rowling's Wizarding World movie Magic, Extraordinary People and Fascinating Places, Volume 1. This book was so much fun to flip through. I just came home one night and this book was sitting on my shelf. I got it for Christmas, and I just had so much fun looking through it. There's all of these really cool pictures and flaps within the course of this book. Like look at this. This is like one page, and then there's like a little flap here, and then you just like, look at that. That's insane. That's just so cool. And I had so much fun with this book, just flipping through it and looking through all of the pages and all the fun goodies that are inside this book. And we have like a whole bunch of flaps and just lots of really fun things. We have these really cool postcards that are in here. Like, look at that. That's just really cool. And so this whole book is basically just a whole bunch of information about the Wizarding World and how it was put together in terms of the filming process. So you get to find some things out about each of the individual characters as well as the setting. And it was just a really cool behind the scenes look to the Wizarding World and how all of the movies were put together. 10 out of 10 would recommend for any Harry Potter fan. I had so much fun reading this, and all the goodies and inside stuff just make this book so much more fun to read and a total keepsake for a perfect Harry Potter fan. And so my final read for December was What Falls from the Sky by Esther Emery. So I picked this book up on the train station on the way to Chicago, and I found an ARC. So that was really cool because you usually don't find ARCs laying around, at least not in Chicago. So I had to pick this up immediately because it sounded really interesting. And this story follows Esther and her journey to finding her faith again through going a year without the internet. And she's gone through a lot of struggles in her life before we meet her in this book, and her marriage is sort of fallen apart. She has 2 young kids that she needs to raise. She quit her job, and so she just kind of is lost and feels a little bit broken, and she needs to kind of find her faith again. And this whole story is her going a year without the internet and sort of figuring out how to do that. And it was a really enjoyable read. This book was somewhat unfinished, so there were like areas where there was like a complete and empty space because there was a certain section that wasn't finished, but I still enjoyed reading it for the most part from what I got out of this arc. I also thought it was really interesting how the story was set up, and it's that the story is set up into like 3 chapters that's each a part of the different season. And so we have snow, which represents the winter, the rain, which represents the spring, the sun, which represents the summer, and the fog, which represents the fall, and then 3 chapters under each of those sections that tell that particular season and how she's gone a year without the internet. And I just thought that was a really unique way of putting this book together, and it's also a really great faith-based book if you believe in God or if you're interested in reading more about the faith and finding out how someone can sort of come back to that after being so far gone. I just really enjoyed it, and I think it was a really enlightening read and a really great way to end my year of reading for 2016. So that is it for my December reading wrap-up. I had such a great year of reads, and this was just such a perfect final 5 books to wrap that all up. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video, and thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time with a new one. Goodbye!